Hello and welcome to another episode from the water's edge. And if you're wondering why I'm slightly covered in groundbait, there's a very good reason for that, which we'll explain to you more throughout the session. But today we've come down to Topcroft lakes and we're going to hopefully be targeting a few carp using the top baiter, which again I'm going to get into the session and explain to you exactly what it's all about as we fish it throughout the day. But this is the first fish we've already been fishing for about 15-20 minutes. The first one's come to the net and there's an unbelievable feeding response out there already, so I'm sure we're going to be in for a few fish throughout the day. But this one's nearly ready, so I'm going to concentrate on getting him in and then we'll get through to the details of exactly what today's going to entail. There we go, absolutely perfect start to the day. Like I said, not been fishing for very long, and a little mirror to kick off the account. It's an unbelievable day for sort of weather, although it doesn't look particularly nice. It's nice and warm, it's overcast, so fishing condition wise you couldn't really pick a better day. So when I woke up this morning I was chuffed with that, and hopefully this little fella is going to be the first of many, because like I said, there is a few feeding out there. So I'm going to get him back and we'll talk you through exactly what we're going to be doing today. There we are, a few more of those and we'll be well away. And I can see already it's not going to take us long when we get out fishing. But while we're out, we're going to talk you through exactly what I was then mentioning in brief before. So if any of you follow our channel, you might remember last year we came down to this very lake and we fished the top baiter. Some unbelievable success. We fished it on the surface and we're putting bait out on every cast, and the fish were coming into it like it was a sort of dinner bell ringing. They really did like it. But that got me thinking, in the fact that there's so many other ways potentially they could get the best out of this, and that's what I wanted to do today. So the top bait, if you've never seen it before, is basically, it's a basket around the top and it's your float as well. So it's basically a bait delivery system that's your float, so it allows you to put bait out on every cast but also fish with a float as well. And what I wanted to do, and what the first thing as soon as I used it came to mind, was I think you could put sloppy ground bait in it. And the reason why I thought that is because I do a lot of sort of the British Carp Championship and the bigger carp matches where you fish zigs quite high just below the surface and you spod sloppy ground bait or a real cloudy sort of mix over the top, and the fish come up, they get in a frenzy, and the only thing to eat is your hook bait. Now in a match fishing situation, the problem with that is you're limited and you can only fish one rod, so you couldn't have a rod out with your bait on and then spot over the top. You're just not allowed to do it in match situations. So this absolutely in one product solves that, so you can put your bait out and fish below it as well. So that was my thought process behind it. So obviously today we've come down to see if that's going to work, and hopefully it looks like it is going to. So a bit more about the bait, because the bait is obviously as important as the method, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create those fish to come up in the water, they get in that cloud and everything, and there's not really anything to eat there apart from your hook bait. So how I've knocked up my sloppy ground bait today is, first of all, I've got a zigger mix from Mainline, which has got everything you need basically. It's already a cloudy ground bait. You've got sort of a crushed hemp in there and other particles that sink at different rates, so it creates a real big buzz in the surface layer of the water. When it hits, it makes a massive cloud. And all I've done to that is I've added some sinking pellets. Now this venue does allow you to fish and feed floating pellets, so I've also put a few expander pellets in there that float. So I've now got stuff on the surface, at the top, and stuff sinking, so I'm creating a whole sort of atmosphere of bait and smell around where I'm fishing. Now all I need to do is keep constantly casting this, topping up the swim, and hopefully, as it had at the start of the session, those fish are going to come in and they're going to be homing in, and the only thing they can really find is my hook bait. So that's the plan. I'm going to concentrate on and get it out there a few more times. Like I said, I am a bit covered in ground, but you need to expect that. I don't come fishing to stay clean, I come to catch fish, and that is exactly what I'm going to try and get on with now. And then we'll talk to you a little bit more as we adapt it. So this is obviously only the first time I've done this with this float, and it's worked already. So as I learn more throughout the day, we'll pass it on to you, and hopefully we'll have another fish pretty soon. So I'm just going to get out there now. I'm just going to put an 8mm pellet on. That's what we started on, and it's only fished sort of, I've started 1.5 foot. So when it sinks, it's literally sort of 1/2 foot below the float. And this, believe it or not, this basket, when it's got a bit of ground bait and bait in it, these fish are pushing out of the way. You can see it in the water. They're really not scared of it. So I'm just going to load that up now. And it's a case of just at the bottom of the basket, putting a little bit of slop in, and then the float sits on top of that. So that's how it casts, nice and aerodynamic. Then when it hits the water, the float comes to the top, which is there, and this starts to leak off a whole attraction. You can imagine it raining over the top of that bait, how sort of appealing that is to a fish. So let's get it out there now. There's a few fish still in the area from the clouds that have been made for the cast before, and hopefully we're going to get another one for the camp. Well, that did not take long at all, and I'm not surprised, to be fair. I generally mean this. I've not seen a feeding reaction to a bait and a method as good as that for an awful long time. They are absolutely going wild for it. They're pushing the float around and really competing. The more you can get them doing that, the better. Now this one isn't particularly very big, so we'll give you a quick show. And there's a lot bigger fish out there. I can see sort of picking a few of them floaters out and also smashing that cage to get at that ground bait. And like I said, it's just unbelievable at the moment, the feeding response in sort of all different layers of the water, and that is when you start catching, you know. Let's get him back, we'll get another bait on, and we'll see if we can have a fish. And the first thing I've noticed with 2 bites is I really wouldn't worry about thinking what's a bite and what isn't. They absolutely smash it, and the float just disappears, and they hook themselves against the weight of the float. So with them sort of attacking it and knocking it about, you're going to get a lot of indications and movement on the float. Don't worry about that. Wait for the float to completely slide away, and that's when you know you're in there. And I'm not putting a lot of bait in this float. It can hold more than that. I'm probably sort of just over quarter, half filling it, but you can see what I'm getting covered in. Look at that. It's just, as I'm casting, a little bit flies out, but it needs to be this consistency to make sure when it hits you get an explosion of ground bait and you get that real cloud effect. If I drop a little bit of this in the edge, you'll see what I mean. It absolutely just makes a brilliant cloud, and you can see how that is making those fish coming in and feeding on it. So let's get back out there with this. And again, there is fish waiting for us. This isn't going to take very long. I'm getting even more covered every cast. Well, there we go. That really didn't take long, and it is so hard to explain how well the feeding pattern is out there. And I knew this method would work. I've seen it happen with big carp, like I said, spotting over the top. I knew sloppy ground bait created probably one of the best feeding patterns that you can just ever create. It's so hard to explain unless you've done it and witnessed it, just how responsive they are to it. It's almost impossible to create it in a different method. But now we're out with the top bait, and we've realised that we can do it all with one rod and bait and fish at the same time. It's even quicker and even more effective. I'm sure this would work even in the big carp scene as well. But another one's coming to that now. I'll concentrate on getting him in, and hopefully we'll get out there and catch a few more. There we go. Slightly better than the other ones we've had. There's a real mixture of size that you can see from the heads that are popping up, taking the little floating pellets, that there's a real mixture of fish out there. But I think it is quite important to have them floating pellets, because although it's mental to see all these fish picking bait off the top, you got to imagine with that cloud of groundbait and other bits falling through the water as well, there's probably just as many fish, if not more, swimming under the water that you can't see, and they're the ones that we're targeting at the moment. But you could catch them either way today. Let's get this one slipped back, we'll get another bait prepared, and we'll get out there again. There you go, he's gone back nicely, and while we're out we'll show you just how we're baiting it, a bit more detail, and a little bit about the rig as well, because obviously there's a few different ways that you can attach the top bait. Now I personally, last time we fished it and this time, have just run it in between a double float stop each end, and that just allows you to do a couple of things. One, you can slide the float stops up if you want and you can fish it deeper, or again you can slide it down shallower and then shallow right up. So it's really versatile on the depth that you're fishing, but there's so many ways. I mean, you could put it on a lead clip, it literally is completely up to you really. Now I just do a knot to knot or loop to loop onto my hook link, which I said, because we're fishing it sort of just underneath the float, it's sort of, I don't know, 1.5 foot maybe, and that's a size 14, and then a bait band onto there, and all I'm doing is banding an 8mm pellet. So rig wise it really couldn't get more simple. It's more about the actual sort of float that allows you to do it, and the bait that you're doing it with that's creating such a good feeding atmosphere. So I'm going to load this up again. We just banded on an 8mm pellet. We're going to push some sloppy mix into there, and again I guess with the mix it's worth a mention, the same with the with anything, you can mix it up to whatever you want to do. So if you want to add a few different flavors in there, a few different colors or anything like that, other types of bait, literally the world is your imagination. You can put in there whatever you want. One thing I probably would say is include some oil in it, just because if you've got a ripple like you have today and things are a little bit harder to see, then it flattens the surface off nicely. So oil is quite effective. And while we're on sort of ripple and perhaps hard to see, perhaps another thing to mention about the top later is the float section here. You can actually get a changeable pack, so different colors. So if it is quite ripply or it gets really bright or really dark, you can change it from an orange top to a yellow, a black, a green, whatever you want, whatever you can see best. So that just makes it an extra little thing about that. And again, like I said, with the oil slick, it flattens it off and just makes it easier to see anyway. So a couple of little things about the bait and the float there that potentially makes your session a little bit easier in not so easy conditions. We haven't had that problem today. I mean, they're going absolutely wild for it. So we've just standard with a standard orange 1.5 foot hook link, and then just the bait, like I said, standard what we ran you through earlier. It's more about getting it in there, be really active with this. Sort of, if I've not had a bite within, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 minutes, I'll be reeling in, putting another one out there, because you need that constant cloud. Like I said, if I was doing this with another rod over the top of a zig, I would literally be casting it. The time it took me to reel it in, load it and cast it again, I'd just be doing it constantly. And like, it's only sort of ground bait, it's not expensive bait, so it loads you're kind of putting a lot in. There's not really a lot of substance to it, so you don't have to spend an awful lot of bait. You could do this with sort of white breadcrumb and sort of whatever pellets or bait you've got in your garage. You just need to create that cloud with a bit of oil. So I'm going to get on with that now, see if we can catch a few more. Like I said, there's plenty out there feeding away, so I don't think it's going to take too long. That one erupted. It must have spooked sort of, I don't know, 7-8 fish literally within sort of a foot away from the float. As it picked it up, they just went mental. It's quite funny that when you cast this in, you can almost see them all homing in into that sort of cloud and ground bait. It's funny to watch actually. You just really see the effectiveness of creating a cloud and a competitive atmosphere. That's what fishing is all about. In any type of fishing, if you can get competition going, they drop their guard and they become easy to catch. And if you can do that, whatever method you do, not just this, in any method of fishing, if you can do that, you'll catch an awful lot more. This one looks fairly decent. I think it's a decent common. I've just had a look of him, so, and we'll give you a look at him. There we go. He didn't know what hit him when he picked that bait up. I think, to be fair, the float is really good for self-hooking, so there's no striking involved. Wait for them to hook themselves, and against the weight of it, they really do pull hard. But full marks to Topcroft as well. There's a good stamp of fish in here, and they're in really, really good condition. Okay, it's always nice watching them swim back, none the worse for their experience. But it's been an unbelievable day. With fish have just kept coming. I don't know how many we've had. We haven't kept count, but it's been really, really good. I'm just going to get another bait prepared now and fill the float up again. But one thing I have noticed throughout the day while I've been fishing it is that obviously when you cast and the float impacts, a big percentage of the bait is coming out, but there's going to be some left in it, and that is exactly what you want. So you're going to have to mess around with your sort of cloudy spod mix, as we're calling it, to get it to the right consistency. But you want it fairly sloppy so it stays in, but you don't want it like liquid so when it hits it's all completely empty. And then what I would advise is every sort of 20-30 seconds, maybe something like that, depending on how well you're catching, just give your rod tip a flick and a twitch, and what that'll do is that'll kick the float up. So the first thing it does is create like a puff of ground bait outside of it, and a few more bits and pieces leak off over your hook bait. And also, as you can imagine, as you twitch your float up, your hook bait twitches up with it. So you're just creating a bit of life into your hook bait, and an extra sort of cloud of ground bait can sometimes, I've probably had a few today, I don't know, 5 or 6 that have literally snatched it on the twitch. And that's quite popular or quite common when you're fishing a pellet waggler as well, which this is, I guess, the closest thing we're simulating would be a pellet waggler. But that is always the case. A little twitch, a bit of life, and they just snatch at it because they don't want their mate next door to come in and beat them to it. So that's all ready to go out there again. We'll get it back on the spot. I have fished all day today onto a clip. Now, I'm pretty confident if I had something really big that I could get that off in time before it caused any drama. But if you're not confident with that, just keep casting it in the same spot, because it does make a difference. Like I said, you can see these fish really homing in on the float, and if you're sort of one over there, they can't get that competition going. It's all about being accurate. The same with any type of fishing. If you're a feeder fishing, you imagine, you're clipping up, you're fishing the same spot. This is no different, but basically the feeder is floating. You're creating the same feeding that you'd expect on the bottom up in the water. So for me, I'd clip up. I have done all day, I've had no issues. If you're happy and confident in doing that, then I would advise to do the same again. But I'm going to stop talking, concentrate on this, because there's a few fish there already, and we'll see if we can't get another one. Into another fish now. It really has been an unbelievable day. They've just kept getting more and more confident, and more that float splashes in and the pellet comes out, the ground bait comes out. They've just got better and better throughout the day. The wind's picked up, so it's made it a little bit harder, but that oil's still flattening it off. But I think we'll probably call this one the last one. I generally do think it would just be a numbers game. You'd sit here and you'd catch as many as you wanted to catch. It's one of those days, you don't always get them like that, but it's all gone right. We've had good conditions, and days like that really do make a difference. So I'm going to concentrate and get this one in. We'll give you a look at him before we sign off. There we go. One of the nicer fish we've had today. Every one has been hooked really well. They're just being so aggressive with it. There's no worry about not hooking them well. But there we go, a beautiful one to end on. Couldn't ask for any more. The first time I've used this particular method with the ground bait in it, but that's twice now we've used a top baiter, and twice it's been a feeding reaction that we haven't seen many other methods produce. So very impressed with it. I'll be doing it again, but for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.